Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a bookish podcast spanning genres and fandoms. I'm your host, Jason, and on today's episode, I'm talking with High Republic author Lydia Kang all about her book, Cataclysm. What is going on, my fandom friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. We are almost halfway through this calendar year. I can't even believe it already. It feels like the year just started. I hope that everyone is keeping up on their reading goals and just having a great time engaging with books. There's been a number of new Star Wars shows and Star Wars media coming out, tons of Star Wars comics. There was like 7 that came out in the at the end of April, early May, which was insane and so fun. There's so many good comics out there, so hopefully all my comic friends are just having a great time with that. I am stoked for today's episode because I'm 2 for 2 back-to-back episodes chatting with Star Wars The High Republic authors. This time I have Lydia Kang joining me, talking all about her book Cataclysm. That is coming up in just a little bit, but I thought that I would start out with my last current next. Let's get into it. The last book I read was Lethal Connections, The Poison ID Unit by Eric Daniel Shine, Melissa Davis, and Karen Fuller. This book was really fun. It was relatively short. I wrote a full review, which is up now on thisdadreads.com, but in short, it's a thriller. It's kind of like a murder mystery, and it's just a really good time. It was, just around 200 pages, and it kept me on my toes, and it had some really nice twists and turns. So just a really fun page-turnery thriller, which I would definitely recommend. The book I'm currently reading is called Deep Fake by Ward Larson. This book was gifted to me by Forge Books, and it's a thriller in its own right, but it's more of a politically oriented thriller. It's about this kind of family man who is new to the political landscape, and he kind of becomes a hero very quickly overnight he kind of thwarts a terrorist attack on a councilman in a public place, and he very quickly kind of goes viral, and he gets tapped by his party to be the next presidential candidate potentially, and so there's an element of mystery, some political intrigue there. So it's been really fun so far. I'm about a quarter of the way through, so definitely keep an eye out on thisdadreads.com. I will be also posting a full review of that book as soon as I'm done. The next book I am reading is my final book in my Red Rising read-through, Dark Age by Pierce Brown. I'm not quite sure how ready I am for this book. I actually, the first time that I read this book, I actually had to reread Iron Gold because I took too long of a break in between books 4 and 5. If you are familiar with the Red Rising books and are a fan, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes after these books, you just need to take a breather. And the first time I read Iron Gold, I was like so stoked. I was ready to read Dark Age, but life just happened. Other books happened, and by the time I picked up Dark Age the first time, I honestly did not know what was going on. I was too far removed from the previous book, so I actually went and reread that book, and then I read Dark Age, and that was probably close to a year ago at this point. That was last year at some point, and so Dark Age is, just like its name says, dark, and definitely will rip your soul out, and so I am excited to read it again. These rereads have been very eye-opening and very, very cool for me to experience, just because, like I said before, I kind of just devour these books in terms of plot and what is happening, and I want to know what's going on, so I read them really fast, and I am a fast reader. So sometimes I don't take the time to really, soak into the prose or to the imagery or the, figurative language and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to kind of take my time with this. Obviously, I read about a book a week, but I'm going to let myself take as long as it takes for Dark Age. And honestly, though, guys, I'll probably give myself like a 2-week maximum because I can't go that long. I can't stay that long with one book. I have other books I got to read, but I am stoked out of my mind that I was able to receive an advanced reader copy of Lightbringer, which is the newest book coming out on July 25th. And so I am very motivated to read Dark Age, and I cannot believe I have been sitting on this arc of Lightbringer as long as I have. And in all honesty, it came out way earlier than I was expecting. I was expecting not for that arc to come out until June. So I know that there are people out there in the Red Rising fandom who have already read Lightbringer, and so I'm so ready for it. I'm just excited. I'm excited to continue on this journey, and this reread has been super fun. So I want to give a quick shout out to my reread group on Instagram. Kudos, guys. You have been doing an awesome job, and Dark Age, here we come. All right, I think it's time to chat with Lydia Kang. KC, how's it going, my man? All right, KC, I think I'm ready to get everything set up to chat with Lydia Kang. Are you ready to go? All right, bud. Well, thank you so much. Why don't you help me in welcoming Lydia Kang, author of the High Republic novel Cataclysm. Hey, Lydia, how's it going? Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me today.
I'm so excited to, first of all, just meet you and be able to chat with you about Cataclysm and just Star Wars and everything.
Me too. It's always a good day when you can talk about Star Wars.
Right, definitely. Well, first of all, let's start off about talking about Star Wars Celebration. It was only, a matter of weeks ago, and it was your first time, right? So what was that experience like for you?
Oh my gosh. It was, people had warned me ahead of time. They're like, it's going to be a little overwhelming. And so even with knowing that, it was still just incredible. Just like the volume of people wearing all their amazing cosplays. The number of people who were doing like High Republic cosplays just blew me away. And I had such a wonderful time. It's nice to be able to always hang out with my fellow Luminous authors because we are scattered all over the world, which means we don't always get time to spend with each other. So I got to see them and hang out for a while. And, the panels were super fun. The signings were actually meeting fans who I only knew on Twitter. And they would be like, oh, it's me, this is my handle. I'd be like, I know you. Yeah. Like, this is so cool. So that was I felt like I was meeting like distant family that, just sort of everybody had like kind of come together for this like big family reunion. And it was so lovely. I had the best time. That's
a great way to put it. My celebration was my first one last year, and I couldn't have put it any better. It was just like everyone's a friend, and like it just felt. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm really bummed I wasn't there. I've told other people that it felt like all the people who couldn't be there, who are part of the online fandom, we felt like we were there. Like the cosplay meetup, I felt like I was there. I didn't feel excluded at all. So it was really cool being able to see some of my friends being able to have that experience that maybe it was their first time.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Yeah, I know people are really good about just like, just tweeting everything that's happening and making it feel like it's very, very live.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll see what happens in 2 years. Like, maybe we'll all be in Japan together.
I know.
Who knows?
I know. Start the fundraising now, right? So.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you mentioned it already. So you talked about your fellow Luminous authors. Like, what was it like for you joining the team? I know it's probably been a while for you now, but especially coming into your first like long form Star Wars publication novel, what was it like just joining that team?
It was a little nerve-wracking because some of the other authors, like George Mann, has known Cavan for a long time, and and Zoraida had already written a Star Wars book, so I felt in some ways like maybe one of the newest and most junior people there because I hadn't written a long form, work yet, and I'd only done one thing in Star Wars, which was a short story. But I knew some of the other authors just from the young adult world. So I knew Daniel and Zoraida and Tessa and Justina. So like they were familiar people. Like we passed each other in the hallways and like been on panels together and stuff like that. So in some ways they weren't complete strangers to me. So that definitely helped. But it's a pretty intimidating thing to write for Star Wars. And I was sort of scared of everything, before I sort of got my footing and got comfortable and realized that actually everybody was just super kind and friendly and there to answer questions and there to help orient me. So yeah, my nervousness went away after a period of time. I think my nervousness didn't really truly go away until I had written a chunk of Cataclysm and realized like it's going okay. I can do this. Like like I'm going to be okay.
Sure.
But yeah, it's definitely an intimidating experience. There's like no doubt. There's a lot of like the weight of this is a huge, important cultural phenomenon, and I need to make sure that what I do matters and it's done well and it's done with care. So yeah, I definitely felt that weight a lot. But it was one that I welcomed. It was just such a great opportunity.
That's awesome. Well, I can confirm, and take it or leave it, but I can confirm that it was done very well. Like Cataclysm was amazing. And like, full disclosure, Lydia, this was the first anything I've read of yours. And so I didn't know what to expect, honestly. Like I looked you up. Obviously I did my research and I'd read what you'd done in from a certain point of view, but to say that I was like surprised and delighted in the best way would be like a huge understatement. Like I loved it. And I know gosh, I'm still seeing people who are reading it now and who are just like, I just got a DM from a friend earlier saying like, this is amazing. And I was like, I know, like keep going. Like, so I can, again, I'm not going to speak for the entire fandom, but I've heard nothing but amazing things. So I'm just going to keep heaping praise on you the whole time.
That is totally fine. I'm just so, like relieved, honestly, just very, very relieved that like it's been really well accepted and people have been very happy with it because again, the bar is very, very high for me as far as like putting out a really high quality, story that people feel super engaged in and actually like, kind of cling to the characters. That means I've done my job. So it just, yeah, I'll never get tired of hearing it. It just makes me, I'm just so happy and so relieved.
I bet. I can only imagine. So something that was really a highlight of the book of Cataclysm for me was the way that you really made each separate storyline shine. I feel like sometimes in books, it's like can be a bummer when you switch POVs, but I feel like that was a real strength of this book. So like what strategies, I guess as an author, do you utilize to make sure that those balances, that it balances out and that it stays, each storyline gets the attention it deserves?
Right. Well, I used a lot of sticky notes for one thing, because, some of the balancing out is literally just the mechanics of like, how often is this like pair of characters showing up in the book and are they progressing? Like, is something happening every time you see them? Is something, how are the stakes escalating as they sort of show up every time on the page? So yeah, there's a lot of balancing going on, and visually, like I had to sort of keep them like on this sort of story tapestry via Post-it notes to make sure that what they were doing compared to other people was sort of working out. So I had never had to really do that. Like I usually write an outline. I usually don't keep any kind of storyboard situation, but like I really had to do it because I've never written something that had this many main characters, and I think it lended itself to the fact that a lot of the characters, they were these dyads,
Right.
It would be like Yada and Sippa. It would be, like Creighton and Ada. And so I could work their sort of relationship plus their own personal arcs, like as they progress through the story. And it made it actually a little bit easier, but it really did feel a little bit like weaving. But except at the end of the tapestry was just like an explosion, but it was sort of like that, but
yeah,
making sure that all the different pieces were just like doing what they needed to do at the right time.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because it did feel like if it was like those duos, like you said, or those dyad that really kept there's just more to it, I guess, in each little mini storyline. And then, I was excited to see where we would be with them next versus like excited to see how we would catch up with the other ones next. So it was great.
Yeah. And I know that like sometimes when I'm reading books, if there's multiple characters there, when they show up on the page, I know that like I get really frustrated sometimes where I'm just like, who are they again? Like, what were they just doing? And so I wanted to make it really clear that when they showed up, you remembered exactly where they were, what bad thing had just happened, or what they were sort of struggling with before you go into it.
Yeah.
So that connectivity was more workable, because I personally hate it when you pick up a story and you're like, I don't even know who these people are. Like, what's going on with them? But I'm sure that might have been happening to some people because, again, there's a lot of characters. So.
But that's a really good way to think of it. Like you're thinking like the reader. That's awesome because, in Star Wars, I keep up with a lot of stuff, but I can't keep it all. It's not always just all in there. So that's not one of my strengths. So that's awesome that you're like catering to that. It's a reality that there's just a lot of characters going at the same time.
It is. Yeah. I know. And I made a really conscious decision that like I was going to have all these characters in them, and in the book. And I knew that was going to be a problem. Like I was like, if I don't do this well, people are going to be lost. They're going to put the book down and they're going to shelve it. So yeah. So that was a big worry of mine. So I tried a little bit extra harder to make sure that, when the story picked up and when the story dropped off, they were these very, concrete beginning and ends where you could feel like, okay, I can latch onto this when it shows up again. Yeah. So I think that was something that I actually learned by doing that because I haven't had to do that before.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So there were some pretty dark moments in Cataclysm. I mean, I would say it rivals some stuff that happens in like even the Rising Storm from phase one. Like, what was your emotional state like during this, like during some of those really intense scenes? Like, did it hit you as hard as it's hitting us or the readers?
It did. I got really emotional writing certain scenes. Like I would, there were certain scenes towards the end of the book, not even in the end of the book, in the middle of the book. Like I would write the first draft and I would just have tears in my eyes and I'd be like, oh my God, like calm down. You're the author, you're in charge, you're okay. And then I would reread what I wrote to see if, it's working. And I would just I would get really teary again. And I'm like, all right, if I'm getting upset over this, I must be doing something right. And I remember, and I was like, like going into this, I knew the book was called Cataclysm. I knew the book was going to have this huge, huge battle at the end. And it was going to be the Night of Sorrows, right? So always in the back of my mind was, this is going to be painful for readers. And I need to make it as painful as possible. Like, not for the sake of like just torturing them or just like general carnage, but if it's going to be called the Night of Sorrows, it's going to be something that just feels like it stabs you in the heart, like so badly. So I had to know that I knew that I needed to hit those sort of emotional notes. And for me personally, they hit because every time I would do a revision or copy edits or past pages, I would find myself crying like during certain passages. And I still do. Like if I were to reread certain I don't want to spoil it, but if I were to reread them, my husband's like nearly finished Cataclysm right now. And he's starting to get very quiet. And I'm like, oh, if I reread that page, I'm going to start crying. Yeah. And he's going to be like, don't. But yeah. So it was very emotional writing it too, for sure.
That's a good metric. I mean, if the author's crying while you're writing it, I think, yeah, you're doing something right. So is that your husband's first time reading it? Like you don't
Yes, share? It's his first time reading it. So with everything that I write, he doesn't read it until it's done.
Okay.
So he's kind of like, look, I'm a reader. I'm not an editor. I'm not a writer, and he doesn't always read what I write in that. Like I write a lot of historical fiction. Like they're like murder mysteries. That's not the genre he tends to read. Okay. So he's like, look, I'm a spectator here and I'm going to read it when it's all done. And so he works full time. So he was behind on his reading in general. So he had just finished up Convergence while we were in London. Okay. And so we got home and he was like, okay, I am ready. I'm ready for Cataclysm. But
was he really ready though? Was he really ready?
I don't know. I think he's, it's really funny though, because he takes notes and stuff. It's very sweet.
Nice.
Like he just,
is he fully in like High Republic, or is he just keeping up like with this phase because you're involved?
He's not fully in High Republic. So he's sort of like dabbling. He's really on top of a lot of the streaming stuff. Yeah. So we're like always watching whatever's coming out together. Gotcha. He's actually doing like going through Legends right now, and he keeps talking to me about it. And I'm just like, it's awesome. I know. So, but so he's a huge Star Wars fan, but this is his first foray into the High Republic. Okay. And he's loving it so far. So he's pretty happy with it.
Good. We'll get our hooks in him for sure.
Yeah, we'll get it. We'll get our hooks in it. We'll get there.
Yes,
We'll get there.
that's great. So I got to talk about Axel, the scoundrel everyone loves to hate, Axel Greylark. So were you as drawn to him as everyone else was after, being introduced to him in Convergence? And yeah, I guess I'll just start with that.
Yeah. It's so funny. Some people love to hate him, and some people just love to love him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he just. I would say the fans that love to love him greatly outnumber the ones who love to hate him.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of where my heart lies with Axel. Like when I knew that I was going to write about him, and when I was reading Convergence and getting the feel for his character and who he was and stuff like that, I just remember feeling, honestly, I kind of had like Kyung's point of view about him.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of like, I love this guy, but he can be such a doofus sometimes. He's so charming, but I've met people who are charming like that. And you're sort of bask in the glow, but at the same time, you're sort of like, what's deeper? And you can tell they're hiding something and you just want to know what that is. So he's really, really intriguing in that way. But as a character, I find him just endlessly fascinating. And so what I got to do was sort of examine him from the perspective of a friend, from Gela, from the perspective of another friend who maybe doesn't have his, best intentions, from Binot. And then I also liked being able to look at him as a son, as a family member from Kyung's point of view. So we got to go at Axel from all these different perspectives, and I had a lot of fun doing that. It was really fun sort of picking apart his brain and showing these tiny little clues about how he felt about certain things, because he doesn't say it on the page very well. He's not very good at expressing himself. And so you have to find these other ways to tell the readers how Axel's actually feeling. And so, and I enjoyed doing that. Those subtleties are always fun to write.
And they were there, I will say, on the page. That was really apparent that there was something underneath the surface. And obviously he's a guy, you can't always trust the words coming out of his mouth. But,
Nope.
And obviously you did a great job too of there being some real shocker moments. So that was good too. You kept some stuff actually hidden, which was cool. So I guess some of my question about him is was his whole journey, and is this one that is kind of, is it mandated where he needs to go, or how much freedom did you have in that, in exploring that kind of journey and that arc for him?
It was mine. It was completely under my control, which was fun. Are we going to do spoilers? Are we allowed to do spoilers?
We can. It's been out for a while.
We don't have to.
I can do a spoiler alert. Go ahead.
So the decision about Axel's sort of end game, what happens at the end of the story. So it was completely my decision.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I did not know that there were readers who were really scared about, am I going to kill him off or am I not going to kill him off? Is he going to have a redemption arc, or is he going to have a redemption arc and just bite the dust, right? It never, honestly, it didn't ever occur to me to kill him. For some reason, I knew he needed a chance. But he needed to go to the lowest low of all the lows before he was able to see it, because he's already hit so many lows, right? He's in jail.
Yep.
He gets arrested. He's a complete embarrassment. He destroys the capital city of Irem. So he does all these he loses, his droid. He already hits all these lows, right? So I knew that in order for him to have any kind of redemption arc, I had to make it so bad for him. And so that was what I really concentrated on, was sort of digging that hole deeper and deeper to a point where he was what would be the one thing that finally smacked him in the face and said, wake up and actually do the right thing. And so that was always in my head when I thought about what I was going to do with Axel.
That's awesome.
So spoiler alert is now over.
And, I'll try not to get too emotional, but as a parent myself, it was very real. I feel that was a very real human situation that you put him in, and people live full lives. Obviously things happen, but I feel that's more of a reality for his story. His story will continue to go on, and it was so good. It was so good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
And it was very, very enjoyable and cathartic to write.
I bet.
Especially after what happened in Convergence.
I bet. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm hoping, I mean, obviously he's still alive and he's still out there. I mean, I can't wait to see what happens to him in the future, whatever that may be. So,
Me too.
yeah, for sure. So which Star Wars character so far have you enjoyed writing the most? And then who is your dream character that you would love to write for?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. So, I had a lot of fun writing Kyung, just because she was very near and dear to my heart. I mean, she's a working mom with kids, and her kids are, my kids aren't misbehaving like Axel, but like, you know, parenting is hard.
Yep.
And I didn't do this on purpose at all. There apparently is a theme of, you know, mother-kid throughout Cataclysm that I didn't actually intend. It just sort of happened, you know, with the mother sort of facing off with Kyung Greylark and like, you know, Sippa and Yaddle. And, you know, so there's a lot of like parental stuff happening throughout both books, actually, if you also think about the queen and the consort, as well as the monarch and Ziri and Fontu and stuff like that. So, but her writing Kyung was really, really fun. I really loved it. It was never difficult. Like for some reason, her voice and exactly what she wanted and what the sort of conflicts in her heart and mind were just so obvious to me when I started writing her. So she was just like easy as pie to write. Yaddle was so much fun because I was like, I get to write Yaddle on the page. It was like, when I wrote my short story, I was writing dialogue for Luke Skywalker. And I remember just being like, I'm writing dialogue for Luke Skywalker. And so it kind of felt that way when I was writing Yaddle on the page. I'm just like, she's an historic character. And I get to actually, you know, put some life into who she is. So that was so much fun. It kind of blew me away that I was allowed to do that.
Sure.
So,
especially for a character who has, I mean, historically has not said a lot. Like there's not a lot of dialogue from her. So that's really fun.
No, there's scant bits here and there.
Yes,
so
that's really fun. That actually leads well into my next question, which I know you may or may not be able to answer, but do you know if this will be the last that we see of the Yada-Sippa relationship?
I don't know. And I'll just leave it at that.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. I would say I hope it's not, but it was great. It was great.
Too.
Having my kids are 8 and 5, and I was like very relating to Yaddle's management of having a young one with her all the time.
Oh my God. Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. Oh,
that came from personal experience. 100%. As well, so.
I totally related on the parental level with this book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So but
it was kind of fun because it wasn't just like normal childcare. It's like Jedi childcare. It's sort of like, you know, not just like, how do I manage this like youngling? How do I manage a youngling with like power? How do I manage a youngling when I'm a Jedi master and I'm supposed to like have all my cool, like just like nothing ruffles me because the Force is with me. But then you throw a kid into the mix and it's like, can we ruffle Master Yaddle with childcare duties? Like, can it happen?
Children can ruffle anyone, Jedi or not. I would say I would argue my kid has ADHD things and a whole journey that my family's on. But I'm like, my kid has powers. And, you know, I'm trying to be a gentle parent and do my thing, but kids have powers. Kids have powers.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Anyway, so my whole thing with This Dad Reads, it's basically my way to help like adults, parents, just connect with other people out there who might have a passion for a hobby, like books, especially Star Wars, all that stuff. So was there someone in your life growing up that kind of inspired that, or kind of mentored you in a parental way that helped you kind of connect with either media or books or just kind of the arts? Like, was there someone in your life that kind of guided that for you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I gotta say, if I have to shout out to anybody, it would probably be, I mean, I've always been a lover of science and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to like the arts and stuff like that, like my English teachers in high school, I would say were probably some of my biggest influences because they had me reading all the stuff that I normally wouldn't have read myself. And they made like a lasting impression. Like I I still remember my English teacher, I think it was like in 10th grade, and we went through this like World War One period where we were reading tons of World War One books, and we were reading like World War One poetry. And I have some of those poems like half memorized in my head from that year. And it made me feel like every time World War One comes back, I get these like visuals of like really, you know, what the trenches were like, what it smelled like, the lice, like, you know, the poems, the gas, like everything, because that teacher was able to just introduce me to all this fantastic writing that I would never, ever, I didn't like history, you know, that I never, ever would have been interested in. And I had other same things for all my English teachers. I just feel like they opened up a world for me that was not something that I had. I didn't have a lot of books growing up.
Okay.
You know, we were like library kids, but even so, I had this tendency to like reread the books that I liked a lot. And so I was really shy about venturing to read other stuff. So yeah, that would probably be like, they would probably be the biggest influences, I would say, on my writing career, as far as like school goes, because of that. Yeah.
That's awesome. And, you know, a lot of the time I'm talking to my friends or guests about like, I'm raising young children right now, but like I have a passion for some things and I want to pass those things on, but that, you know, kids they're always going to gravitate towards what they gravitate to. But I guess my question is like, as a mother and as a family a family manager, what are things that you do in your family to help kind of like nurture that spirit of discovery and story and like, helping to make sure that that's getting passed on?
Right. That's such an important question. I feel like, you know, in my family, my husband and I are huge Star Wars fans. My oldest, who's in college, he is a Star Wars fan. And then my other two, like, have seen the movies, but they're not
interested. Okay.
They're not fans at all. Right. And so I am not going to force them to sort of be like, well, you have to read this and you have to read that. But I do really try very hard to expand their world. And I feel like from that comes curiosity, and from curiosity comes the ability to be creative. So one thing that we try to do as much as possible is travel or take walks, you know? So locally, just walk and like just be outside and not on your phone, kind of a thing. It just sort of helps refresh your brain a little bit and just sort of see the world. And traveling wise, I feel like we've been really lucky because we've like, since our kids were babies, anytime we went somewhere, we would just take them with us. So they're very well-heeled kids as far as like getting on planes and stuff. But even just like traveling pretty close, like just an hour's drive away or something like that, all of that just brings more life experience. And from that life experience comes curiosity, and it sort of like feeds on itself. So I can't ever force them to do anything. I just sort of like welcome it. And I try to model for them, you know, the fact that like I am a pretty curious person myself, and I'm always like interested in like seeing new things and doing things and asking really bizarro questions that I end up having to look up on Wikipedia and share with them. So I want them to be curious forever. Like I want them to be like 99-year-old, you know, doddering old little like, you know, men and women people who are still sort of like eyes open and wonder at this universe. Like, I think that's a great state of mind to have. It's a very optimistic state of mind. But I think it's really just good for your heart and your brain and your soul, and definitely for creative reasons.
I love it. Thank you. That was an excellent answer. Okay, so something also I ask all my guests. I typically on every episode talk through all the books I'm reading, and I call it a last, current, next. So I talk about the last book I read, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm planning on reading next. So what is your last, current, next?
Let's see. The last thing that I read was The Personal Librarian, which is about J.P. Morgan's private librarian from like 1910 or something like that. The main character, she passed for white, and so that was a big part of her life at the time. What I'm reading right now, which is really, really good, it's called The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay, and it's I'm about 90% done. I actually am doing a book club today to discuss it. And that's been really, really good. I really read all over the place. And so I read thrillers, I read contemporary stuff, I read nonfiction, Star Wars when I get a chance. But oftentimes the Star Wars that I'm reading is like in the High Republic. Like it's my fellow Luminous authors, like I'm reading their like, their stuff.
Yes.
So to make sure that I'm like on pace. And I'm reading a lot of research because I'm of my writing and stuff. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. And I do like to keep my mind open to the books are another way of sort of having that that sort of experience outside of yourself that keeps your mind and brain open. And it's really a pleasure to be able to see how other authors put words to paper in their own way and make things come alive. So it's a sort of magic alchemy that everybody does. And so it's fun to be entranced by somebody else's magic for a little while. I love that.
Definitely. On a side note, are you a Michael Connelly fan? Do you know his stuff?
I'm not, but I keep he's huge, but
so good. Okay, you said thrillers. I know he's one of the big thriller guys. Like I love him. Anyway, well, thank you so much. Is there anything? Where can people kind of interact with you or find you if they haven't done that already?
Sure. So my website is lydiakang.com, and I usually try to keep updated, like events and stuff like that. But I am on Twitter reasonably often now, and I'm on Instagram fairly regularly. So on Twitter, I'm Lydia Y. Kang, and on Instagram, I'm Lydia Kang. So I'm there and happy to interact with people if you guys ever hop on. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's great. Any other like appearances this year that you know of, or cons that people can maybe catch you at? Signing?
I believe I'm going to be Omaha has its own kind of Comic-Con, which is called OCon, and I believe I will be there, but the dates and times are not set yet.
Cool.
I'll be doing another book signing later on in the summer here in Omaha. And that's kind of it for now. A lot of there's going to be a lot of stuff like this that's coming out, like podcasts and videos and stuff like that, interviews, which have been so much fun. So yeah, on that note, thank you for having me here. It was really fun.
Oh, you're very welcome. I appreciate it so much. And everyone, Cataclysm is out now. It's great. And just thank you so much again, Lydia, for joining me.
Oh my gosh, anytime.
Appreciate it. I want to give a special thanks once again to my guest, Lydia Kang, for joining me this week. I had the best time chatting with her. I feel like we could have just chatted forever about books and, kind of parent life, family life. She was just such a great guest to have, and I really hope that she can join me again sometime. And I honestly hope that she continues to write for Star Wars. I was blown away by Cataclysm, and I cannot recommend that book enough. So if you have not reached that point in your reading journey yet, I am excited that whenever you do get to that point, that you can just experience the joy and just her talent for writing. And it was such a great book, and it was such a pleasure to chat with her. That does it for this episode. Hope you can join me next time for another episode of This Dad Reads. Take us out, Casey. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at This Dad Reads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads, the podcast, is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.